The K&N Series 77 cold air should appeal to the 2010 through 2014 6.2 Raptor owners out there who are looking for an all-black, no-tune required cold air from one of the leaders in aftermarket filtration. Now, on top of that, the K&N will also be one of your only options in the category to include this coolant reservoir here, relocating the stocker and helping to clean up the engine bay appearance. Your pricing for the CARB-certified intake will fall in the high $300 range, and it is going to get a simple 1 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter from me, with some more info to come later in the video. Now, if you're watching this video, then chances are you're probably familiar with or have seen the name K&N at some point, and for good reason. Now, they're easily one of the biggest names in the automotive aftermarket and have become one of the most trusted names in aftermarket filtration, thanks to their filters, of course, but also their complete intake systems like we have here. So the Series 77 that we have in this video is just one of a few different options or models that K&N offers, and in this case, it is going to deliver the all-aluminum construction for the intake tube before being finished off in that matte black powder coat that is going to add some durability to the tube itself, while also looking pretty sharp under the hood. Now, for owners who prefer just a little bit more flash, there are a couple of polished or chrome options in the category as well from companies like BBK and Engine that you can grab for just about the same price as the K&N here. But getting back to the K&N here, again, it will be unique in the fact that it is one of your only options in the category to include this coolant reservoir relocation kit with their particular intake. Now, is this completely necessary? Not exactly. There are plenty of other manufacturers that design their intake to work with the factory coolant reservoir tank, but that doesn't mean there isn't any benefit to this. Now, for one, I do think relocating the coolant reservoir helps clean up the engine bay slightly compared to the big and unattractive stocker, which, let's face it, after a few years of use, is probably looking a little worse for wear. Now, secondly, it was my observation that the design of the K&N Series 77 here with the relocation kit allowed for a slightly bigger filter overall compared to some of the other options I've seen in the category, and there is some inherent benefit to that. Now, a larger filter won't cause any undue restriction of the airflow, especially as your modifications grow, and not nearly as important, it's gonna take this guy a little bit longer to get dirty on you. But aside from the textured matte black aluminum intake tube here, the heat shield that you are receiving with the kit, and of course that coolant reservoir, which we've covered in depth by now, you are also gonna be receiving one of K&N's bread and butter products. Of course, that's their high flow oiled filter here. Now, the filter is comprised of a cotton gauze material sandwiched between a couple of layers of epoxy coated aluminum wire mesh, just for added durability and to help this thing kind of keep its shape over the years. Now, speaking of going a few years, K&N will claim these filters will go over 100,000 miles with proper care and proper maintenance. Basically, this means just washing this thing, re-oiling it whenever the filter needs it. So we've talked about what basically you are getting from a component and a build standpoint, but let's talk about the big benefits that I think anyone would expect when adding an aftermarket cold air, and that of course would be more power. And while K&N claims around 20 horsepower, 20 foot-pounds of torque with their kit, I typically tell folks to expect more in the high single-digit, low double-digit territory at the rear wheels without a custom tune involved. And keep in mind, guys, this intake does not require the use of a custom tune. So, of course, throwing an aftermarket tune at the truck with the K&N installed will only increase those power numbers at the end of the day, but by itself, you're looking forward to some smaller gains at the rear tires, along with an improved throttle response, and finally, a noticeable bump in sound coming from under the hood of that 2010 through 2014 Raptor, namely the mighty 6.2 power plant. And again, if you've checked out the customer reviews, these are kind of reoccurring themes you're seeing from some of the guys who have actually installed this intake on their Raptor, so I encourage you to check those out if you haven't done so already. Now, as for the install itself, well, on the surface, this is gonna be a very simple job, as is the case with most aftermarket intakes, but you do have to factor in the added step of switching out that coolant reservoir here, which is gonna stretch the install slightly. Either way, I'm going 1 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter here, maybe an hour or so from start to finish before you are all wrapped up. Tool-wise, a basic socket set along with a few screwdrivers, and you're also gonna need a T20 Torx bit to handle the removal of the mass airflow sensor. I'd also recommend having a set of pliers on hand to help you with the removal of the hose and the clamp for the factory overflow tank and then transferring it over to the new K&N option here. Getting started, remove the factory intake by removing the clamps at the throttle body and at the airbox. Remove the factory airbox from your truck with your socket set and set that aside. With the factory airbox out of the way, I would recommend removing the factory coolant reservoir. Now just have a rag on hand to catch any liquid that may spill during the swap. Now you can start installing the K&N. Now first, I'd recommend assembling most of the intake on a workbench or something similar before dropping it in your truck. Attach a clamp at the throttle body and then install the new coolant reservoir to the heat shield. Now you can go ahead and plug in that mass airflow sensor, make sure everything is tight with all of your clamps and your installation is complete, but of course don't forget to top off that new coolant reservoir. Wrapping this one up here, guys, the K&N is one of the top selling 6.2 systems on the site based off a name alone, but factor in the solid build along with the perfect fitment and you have a can't miss intake for just south of $400. So that is my review here of the K&N Series 77, which you can grab right here at AmericanTrucks.com.